Hello Internet, and welcome back to Tech-Xample. Here we have quite the funkalicous card, the Fury X, the big ultra-enthusiast Halo card of GCN3, standing head, shoulders above everything else AMD had at the time, excluding the other Fury cards of course. The Fury X was balls to the walls, no hold bar, pushed to the limits, and this reflected in the stock and only cooling design. A stock single GPU coming from factory with liquid cooling, sanctioned and blessed by AMD themselves, which is the most striking thing about the Fury X, and the main thing everyone knows this card for. However, was AMD's gamble on pushing the Fiji Flagship so far as to need liquid cooling worth it, especially when in regards to its sibling cards? The GCN3 architecture was an evolution of the GCN2 chips found in the Hawaii family, including the R9-290X. While it shared a similar foundation, Fiji focused on efficiency and massive parallel throughput, introducing lossless color compression, allowing for better memory bandwidth utilization by compressing data before it hit the VRAM, something the Fury family desperately needed, with the brand new HBM on die. By stacking memory dice vertically directly onto the GPU interposer, AMD bypassed the physical limitations of traditional GDDR5, reducing the PCB size significantly, allowing for the Fury X's uniquely small 7-inch card size. Dr. Lisa Su famously unveiled the card by pulling it out of her jacket pocket to emphasize its small form factor, a world-class GPU you can hold in one hand. Speaking of AMD executives, perhaps the most famous, and later controversial, quote came from Raja Koduri, then SVP of the Radeon Technologies Group. During the launch event, he set high expectations for enthusiasts, saying, "This card is an overclocker's dream. We've over-engineered the power delivery and the cooling solution so that you can push this chip to its absolute limits." Which turned out to be a total lie, since Fury X is redlined from the start with such little headroom as to be useless, especially with the HBM's clocks being locked down. Featuring the full-fat Fiji chip with 4096 cores, 4GB of HBM at a locked 500 MHz, with a 4096-bit memory bus, one might be forgiven for giving the specs list a glance and feeling that this is the same GPU as the Fury Nano, which, yeah, it kind of is. The big difference is the 50 MHz in core clock, bumped up to the 1050 MHz on the X, and that wonderfully high power limit compared to the Nano. Combined with the mildly exotic cooling as well, and the X seems to try to push this GCN3 core in a completely different direction than the Nano and Fury, aiming to show what this chip could do when let loose versus being space efficient or reasonable. AMD themselves seemed quite excited for the future of this card, crowing about its advantages against the GTX 980, the advantages of that HBM they spent so long working on, and how amazing GCN3 was going to be. Of course, we all know that it never really reached the heights AMD talked about, not least because of the constraint of that tiny 4GB of HBM they boasted about. But maybe, just maybe, the years of driver updates and API changes have been extra kind to the Fury X over its sibling cards, and we'll see those impressive specs come to benefit it in a modern environment. We start off with the Passmark suite of tests representing 2D, 3D, and commute workloads. Here we see the Fury X show why it's the cream of the crop of the Fiji family, with it easily outpacing its sibling cards at 1095, 10,344, and 4,269 points respectively. Fury X does so well here, outmatching the siblings, the Nano and the Plain Fury, that it almost makes you forget the cost of that performance, both literal and power consumed. In for Mark II test, we see the Fury X so thoroughly crush the other Fury cards that you'd think the Fury X had a grudge to prove itself the best. In fact, despite sharing the same core and memory, the X is 30% faster than the Nano in every single test. Now, whether that shows how far the Nano was squashed or how monstrous the X was, that's a matter of opinion. I'd love to hear what you think at home about that performance gap. Onto the 3D Mark Suite, with Firestark Extreme starting us off. Here, the Fury X scores 8,882 points, placing it a more reasonable 11% faster than the Fury Nano. In Time Spy, the performance gap once again becomes a performance gulf, as the Fury X reaches all the way up to 5,156, giving it a 23.6% lead over the Nano. Ending things off with the superposition test, in both 4K optimized and 1080p extreme flavors, we get the same type of warnings we saw from testing the other Fury cards about VRAM running out, and yeah, it does, but the Fury X seems to not mind too much, still cruising in at a 15% increase in performance over the Nano in 1080p and 16.6% in 4K. Clearly, the Fury X has proven its benchmark chops. Its power delivery, cooling, and compute strength have let it flex the true strength of GCN3 here. But in gaming, where drivers, utilization, and 100 other variables around each card show their true performance, how will the Fury X fare there? Starting off with the custom Dolphin benchmark at 4K with 8x SSAA, we see the Fury X reach 29.7 frames per second, outperforming the Fury Nano by 4.2%, or by about a single frame on average. Nothing big enough to consider one over the other, certainly. In Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, the Fury X once again suffers the same fate as the rest of the Fiji cards, being warned about outdated and potentially broken drivers, where we once again ignore the warning and push on. We see the Fury X only manage 12.4 frames per second at 1080p high, which is actually quite a bit slower than the Nano. Its 1% and 0.1% lows are dramatically higher, most likely from the higher power limit and better cooling, but the dramatic drop in averages is certainly odd. In 1440p, we see much of the same, but now the lows are proportionally behind, with this story being true even at 4K. Something in the drivers cannot correctly let the Fury X function correctly here. In Slime Rancher 2, a game where we test a more open world sandbox, we see the Fury X finally pull away from its brethren, reaching averages of 59.8, just under the magical 60 FPS mark, with its lows also being significantly better than the other Furies. At 1440p, we see it continue to lead the other Fury cards, hitting 39.4 on average, with the lows closely behind. And at 4K, we see the Fury X fall quite behind the plain Fury, but still staying well ahead of the Nano here. I used the same test system, scenes, and settings between reviews, so I can only point to some weirdness in the driver not fully allowing all the CUs to be loaded evenly here, as the card clocks slightly higher than the plain Fury as confirmed by MSI Afterburner logs. Ending it off with Overwatch, we start the Fury X out at 1080p Ultra, where we see it far and away dominate the other Fiji cards, being nearly 25% faster than the Nano. Moving to 1440p, the X continues to keep an advantage over the other cards here, but that lead starts shrinking over the Fury, at only 15% faster versus the 50% over the Nano. Ending it off with 4K, the liquid-cooled Fury stumbles, and is now ever so slightly behind the plain Fury, with the dismal 1% and 0.1% low behavior matching that of the tiny Nano, both well behind the air-cooled Fury. With all these amazing results compared to the Fury Nano, you'd think the Fury X is amazing back in 2017 and now in the present. But there's two big things I've been purposefully ignoring. Actually a few, but anyway. First and foremost, I've ever so conveniently ignored the other GCN3 flagship for the most part, the normal Fury. And once you start looking and comparing these two results, things start to look a whole lot worse for the X. Outside of synthetic benchmarks where the X does keep a nice lead, the Fury X is only marginally ahead of the lower tier Fury, even loses sometimes depending on the workload demand of a particular game. Maybe with custom drivers or with different customized settings, we could see the Fury X lead much more consistently, but that is simply not the case here, and you'd be hard pressed into buying a Fury X in modern day, or even back in the heyday of the Fiji flagships. Not that the Fury X didn't sell, because it did. The Fury X had a sellout launch, but for reasons that were both positive and negative. Within 24 hours of its June 24th launch, the card was listing as out of stock at major retailers like Newegg. While initial demand was high among enthusiasts, the sellout was largely attributed to limited supply. That HBM technology used a complex interposer with reportedly low yields, meaning AMD simply couldn't produce as many units as Nvidia could for its competing cards. Launching with an MSRP of $649, it was positioned as a direct head-to-head competitor to the 980 Ti, an absolutely fatal blow for the Fury X in particular because it never quite matched the GTX flagship. The Fury series did help AMD claw back some ground from Nvidia, however, driven by aggressive holiday pricing on the air-cooled Fury and the Nano cards. By Q4 2015, AMD's GPU market share rose from 18.8% to 21.1%, but with no real help from the Fury X, which continued to languish. What to make of the Fury X? It really felt like AMD flew a bit too close to the sun here. A stock GPU requiring liquid cooling is a bad omen for overall efficiency, and speaks volumes to the desperation AMD was feeling at the time, pulling out all the stops to try and claw back market share from Nvidia, especially in that enthusiast niche. But the poor Fury X could not compete with Nvidia's best at the time, and with that expensive HBM leading to higher prices, it left the X a struggling, sinking boat. They hyped the card up, calling it an overclocker's dream, but AMD had already pushed the thing so hard it could barely budge as it was, even with the liquid cooling. In today's market, it simply makes no sense for anyone, I think. The air-cooled Fury is so much cheaper used, it's not even funny, because X's still go for over $100 today, a price that is simply ridiculous for what kind of performance you're getting here. Go buy an RX 588GB, or better yet, go buy something that gets updated drivers for that much money. Leave the Fury X to boil in its own hubris forever.